Next, we have Don Carter, who is a former police detective turned entrepreneur, speaker, writer, and transformational coach who helps Black professionals and entrepreneurs shift their perceptions to eliminate self-doubt and their perceived limitations to create more revenue in their businesses and experience freedom and abundance in their lives. Before launching his coaching company in 2019, Don spent a decade in law enforcement in Kansas City, until realizing he had shifted from serving in his work to just surviving. After a successful career as a detective, Don now guides entrepreneurs and executives to investigate their inner lives to unveil their most authentic expressions of self and powerfully impact their outer world. Please welcome Don to our TED Talk stage.
Just wanted to have a little conversation. If you can't tell, my voice is needing some bearing with. Yesterday I had no voice, but the first thing I want to say is that I have been a lonely man. That in most of the environments that I spend a lot of my time in, I've actually felt odd or out of place. And I believe for people who don't reflexively conform, that this is a common feeling. Have any of you ever felt that way? But rarely in that have I ever wanted to really be included into somebody else's world. Inclusion to me was something that, even though I understood the sentiment of it, it felt like it was a little bit of a cringy thing. And I never understood why. I figured that if I belonged somewhere, and I already felt like I did, that I didn't need to be included. And that if I was included, there was a message to me. And so today, what I want to do is explore some of the unique perspective that I've gained about what it means to be included and the things that I feel are actually really the remedy for that. Now, the spring of 2017 was a really powerful year for me. I had just left a decade-long law enforcement career, and I was embarking on a new journey in life. I found myself wandering into the world with a new eyesight and really wanted to create some experiences that made me come alive again. So as I was recovering from my professional career, I encountered things that allowed me to see the world in a different way and to see myself in a different way. I spent time talking with people, spent time searching my own heart, and what I learned was transformative for me that year. And those things are what I'm going to share with you today. Now, a few years before 2017, I had one of the most transformative experiences of my life, and it was while I was a detective. I had an interview. I was interviewing a witness to a violent crime, and it went in a typical fashion. I had the woman sitting across from me, and she was describing the suspect. I was in violent crimes, and so the vast majority of those crimes were committed by Black males. And so when she described him, she said he was a Black male, gave me a general description of his clothing, his height, his weight. And then she said something that I didn't expect, something that actually jolted me a little. She said, he's this height, this weight, wearing this, but he's light-skinned like you. Like I said, it jolted me just a little bit. I didn't know what was happening inside. But I just wrote it down, kept going. 2 weeks later, another woman that I was interviewing in the same circumstance said almost the exact same thing, the exact same way. And at this point, it sent my mind reeling. It was almost like somebody unplugged a bathtub and my brain was swirling as I was going down. This was a huge shift in my perspective about who I was. Because to me, I wasn't light-skinned, I was Black. I was blackety black, as we like to say jokingly. Like so black, dark like the chair's black. And this is the first time that I had encountered something that helped me see how deeply my conditioning in my early years was impacting the way I was seeing myself in the world. Because logically, I knew that I wasn't the darkest skin tone that there was. But when someone told me that I was not what I thought I was, it unhinged my reality. And so, what does it really mean to be black? What does it mean to be human? These are all the questions that I was processing through as I was learning about the world. So rewind back to 2017. Actually, that's fast forwarding now that we're further in the past. And something happened in my life that was so transformative that I've never been the same since. And it was around the idea of kindness. I'll tell you this story really quick. I had just left my law enforcement career, like I said, and I was involved with some things with entrepreneurs in my community. I was involved with several other things. And this one particular day, I was getting some dinner late, pulled up to the Popeyes drive-thru, had a quick conversation with the girl there. Well, I learned that she wanted to become a nurse. Not a big deal, but in this short exchange, we had a moment of something that, while really not unique, it was powerful because I saw her and I felt like I was tired because I had had a long day and she looked tired. And so all I said was, hey, it's almost over. I knew it was 20 minutes till they were closing. That small act transformed the rest of my day and the next several months. As I drove away from there, I was thinking about what I could do for her, who I could connect her with in my community. And by the time I got home, I had something happen in my mind that I had the idea to pay for her to go to nursing school. So I wrote up a quick little Facebook post. I didn't know anything about nursing. And I invited my Facebook friends, several of which were something going on with the, oh yeah, we're way far ahead. Should still be on the first, should still be on the first slide. But to continue the story, paying for her to go to nursing school was something I didn't know if I could do or not. And so I invited my Facebook friends into that. I had about 1,300 of them, so I learned that you could get a CNA license for maybe $1,500. So I said, if I could get 300 of us to throw in $5, we could send this girl to nursing school. This was nothing to me. The next day, we woke up and the post went viral. Several people started chiming in. Many people started to give. And by the end of the next week, we had raised $15,000. Well, that's not the magical part of the story. This was 2017, just after the 2016 election, which was probably one of the most divided elections that we've had recently. You could feel the sense of division within us. And so I was curious as to why something that was so small to me caught fire so quickly with people in my community. I mean, I literally had news calling my house the next day after I posted it. I was getting calls from the Ellen show, went on the Steve Harvey show, like all of this crazy stuff for this one little thing. But what had happened was that for the first time in a while, I've been being recognized for just being myself. I wasn't performing. I wasn't doing anything to gain any attention. And that was what changed me. Now, this idea of kindness, as you saw, kind of pop up a little bit. And we still need to be on the first slide. I'm sorry. This idea of kindness was one that I'll get into a little bit later. It healed me in many ways that I didn't expect. And so let's get back to the inclusion piece. When I talk about it and hear about what's going on with DEI and having an inclusive community, as a black man, it does make me kind of cringe a little bit, and I never knew why. But I started to geek out because I'm kind of a nerd. Remember, I feel odd in a lot of places. And I went deep into what the word means. So now let's go to the include slide. To include is a very strange word. This is the second slide. Because you know what exclude means, right? It means to shut people out or to shut things out. So include actually means to shut in or to confine. And for myself, at least, and for other human beings, I don't want to be confined as much as I want to be free. And so while I get the idea, what really gets communicated is that once you're in, you don't get the freedom to be who you want to be. And so, you look and see that I look at the etymology of words a lot. And this one means literally to shut someone or something in, materially to enclose, imprison, or confine. My original title for this talk was The Prison of Inclusion and the Kindness Key to Freedom. And so let's talk a little bit about that kindness. Oh, next slide, please, sorry. This is what inclusion feels like to me. It feels like a space that gets closed in on you where, again, if I felt like I belonged already, I wouldn't need to be included. And so the fact that I'm being included, it's like, hey, come in here and get trapped. It's kind of a weird twist on the word. But a lot of times we use words without understanding what they really mean to us. And we adopt an idea that is really contrary to what we really want, which is to feel like we belong where we are. Because human connection and connecting with each other is something that we all crave, I believe. That craving is what sends us into the world to really seek out how we fit with others. Next slide. And some of the limitations of this form of inclusion. The first one is tokenism. This is another reason why I felt that cringe. I didn't know why. That when you get included, and I'll just actually read this, that this approach can make people feel like they are included only to meet diversity quotas, not for their unique perspectives or talents, which isolates individuals and undermines the essence of true connection. And what we're really talking about is creating true connection. Next slide, please. The next limitation is the superficial or surface level engagement, where you do things that feel like it's helping you be inclusive, but actually it's really just a surface level thing, and that superficiality that without the ongoing engagement and dialogue, the efforts can create a feeling of a prison with that superficiality. And that is where the root causes of exclusion and misunderstanding remain unaddressed. And then the third one, and this is, go to the next slide, cultural homogenization. It's that picture I showed you before, where by being included, there's like this expectation that you have to fit into whatever is going on already. And so there's this feeling that even though you're going into an environment where you may not have felt like you belonged before, but you got brought in anyway, that somehow you have to become like whoever is there already. To me, that's not fostering the kind of communities that feel like they're connective. And so what do? That summer, next slide, please. I wanted to show you this diamond because in my search about what inclusion meant, how many people are familiar with inclusion in diamonds? Yeah. Do you usually want inclusions in diamonds? Not really, because an inclusion in a diamond is seen as an impurity and it tends to lower the value. However, the uniqueness of some diamonds that have particular inclusions actually enhances their value because you know that that diamond is unique. And so if we start to think of inclusion in this way, maybe we're on the right track. Next slide, please. And so let's talk about kindness, because this is the big piece for me. That summer in 2017, after the wiles of media storm, and it was crazy. It didn't make any good sense to me. So what I did is I went into my detective bag and I decided to investigate further. I was like, why are people going so crazy over something so simple? Why am I contacted by the media around the world, literally, But again, we thirst and crave connection. And in a time that feels like it's divided, a simple little story of connection just went wild. But I decided to do an experiment where for the whole summer, for 3 months, anytime I had the inclination internally to do something good towards somebody or to have some sort of engagement with them, no matter how awkward or how inconvenienced it was, I just did it. I just flexed that muscle. I'm sure you all have had this a lot, where you have a thought, you see somebody, and you think you want to do something for them, but it's kind of awkward. You don't know what to say. You don't know what they'll think about you. You're afraid of being rejected. Or you just don't have time. You got busy stuff going on. You got people waiting on you. And so you just let it pass by. It's inconvenient. It's awkward. But it's a muscle that if you work it, it can have some really dynamic, transforming effects on your life. And so, this experiment, I was just gonna go through the summer. Every time I had that inclination, I was just gonna follow it. And I discovered a deeper definition of kindness. Now, again, I'm geeking out. As you can see, the word kindness, does anybody know what the suffix NESS means? It just means to be in the state of or the condition of whatever the word is that comes before it. So if you have redness in your face, it just means that your face has red condition. It's red. It's simple. But again, we have words that we don't really think about how they're used. What does kindness actually mean? And I started going through etymologies and dictionaries and whatever I could find to see what the real definition of kindness was, and nothing ever quite cut it. And then it hit me. If NESS is to be in the state of whatever the word is before, then literally kindness is to be in the state of kind. And what is kind? In the English language, kind is just referring to things that are alike. And so kindness literally to me is being in the state or condition of recognizing that you are like or connected to whatever you're observing. And you can show kindness to anything. But kindness is not just what you do, it's how you see the world. And once I discovered that, all of the traumas that I had experienced in my law enforcement career, all the things that I felt pressured by as I exited my own professional journey from law enforcement began to settle. And that settling empowered me to do more of the same thing over and over again. And it transformed me from the inside out, because that's how we live in the world, from the inside out. So, how do we create true connection? Go ahead to the next slide. What do you believe your most valuable asset is? Is it your money? Is it your time? Well, let me submit to you, next slide, please. Your most valuable asset is your attention. It's the very essence of your existence that comes into the world and focuses on something else. Anything that you point your attention at, you're showing that it's important to you. And where your attention goes, your energy goes. And so if your energy is getting focused somewhere, that thing is actually growing, whatever it is. So the art of true connection. First slide, or next slide, please. Let's go with the A. Acceptance. But of yourself first. How many of you have turned that very energy of your attention back on yourself with love, with acceptance, to where you can look in the mirror, and believe me, this is very awkward. Look in the mirror in your own eyes and say, I love you. You're worthy. What you did was good today. Now, if any of you are cringing at the thought of that, let me further submit to you that you have not fully accepted who you are. And if you don't accept who you are, yourself, then it is virtually impossible for you to fully accept someone else, whether you want to include them in your world or not. These are just basic principles. So, that's the A, acceptance of self. Let's go with the second, R. It's the receptivity of reciprocity. I know that's a lot of R's. Basically, all that means is that you are open to receiving from others. That maybe if you're somebody who likes doing good in the world, you want to go and have this big, great community of inclusivity and connection, but you want to give and not receive. It doesn't work that way. Everything in your world, in nature, runs in a cycle. Something gives and then it returns. That's what reciprocity means. This is a natural flow. So if you cut off the receiving end of the flow, it doesn't matter how much you give, you've stopped the system. So the receptivity of reciprocity is the R in the art of connecting, true connection. And the last one is a T. And this is transparency. Now, I like to think of transparency in the same way that other people refer to vulnerability. But there's one catch. The only reason that I have a problem with vulnerability as what I'm talking about here is because if you're vulnerable, then there is the, expectation of harm. To be vulnerable means that somebody can hurt you. But if I'm just being transparent, letting myself be seen, I have full agency over myself as a human being. And if I want to show you who I am, if I want to tell you about my heart, if I want to tell you about what I'm thinking, there's no risk of harm unless I permit it. And so transparency, though, is the willingness to be seen. There are real vulnerabilities, but this is not the one I'm talking about. I would be hurt if my wife said something cruel to me. She doesn't. She's great most of the time. So there's a real vulnerability there, but going out into the world with people that you don't know and creating a means of connection, it doesn't have to be any vulnerability. So those are the three parts to creating true connection: acceptance of self, receptivity of reciprocity, and transparency. Next slide, please. So there's one little last story. I think I might have time. In this experiment, I had several encounters that were really dynamic and magical for me. There's one that I'm thinking of right now. It's with a woman named Denise. I found out her name that day, but I'd seen her around my neighborhood several times, mostly at the liquor stores, mostly on the street hanging out, but I noticed her. And so it's one time I'm pulling into the convenience store and I see her and I get that feeling again. And I'm like, oh. So I step out of the car and I say, "You're out here every day, aren't you?" That was it. And she looked at me and she said, "I don't know why I'm out here, but I thank you for paying attention to me." And then, like that, she started bawling her eyes out, crying. "I don't even know why I'm here. Jesus told me he was going to do this and do that." And I'm like, all right. So I just let her fall into me. And I'm just holding this woman out in front of the liquor store in my neighborhood. And another guy comes out and he's like, "Oh, what's going on?" He's playing tough. And then another guy comes out and he sees us hugging and her crying. And he's like, "Oh, what we doing? We praying?" I was like, "Well, oh, yeah, I guess we can pray if you want to." So then we stand out there in front of the liquor store and pray together. I didn't know these people. I don't go around praying with random people. Hadn't planned on praying that day. But after that, it was weeks and months before I saw her out on that street again. And I don't know what happened, but I know that it was something special in that moment. And I have several other stories from that experiment. And so when it comes to kindness, and showing kindness in this world, i.e. creating real connections. You don't have to pay it forward like people talk about. You don't have to pay it back or give back. Next slide, please. You only need to pay attention. Your attention is the most valuable thing you have. And when you give it in that way that we talked about today, you'll be able to create meaningful connections that transform you and the world around you for good. Thank you.